Hello, hello, and welcome everyone to In Time. My name is Nicholas Lamar Soutter, and with me today, as always, is Vox. Vox, how are you?
Doing good.
Good.
Thanks.
All right, so
I hope you're doing well.
I am, thank you. I'm tired, not because of anything happening. You know, I haven't been all that busy. I've been slouching, as you know. I'm a big slouch, slacking off.
Yes.
Oh, dear Lord. Well, so we're going to have, immediately after this, we are going to do our daily rundown. So we've been doing the overtime daily rundowns at this time, but we had an opportunity to have Dr. John Shook on, so we decided we would go for that and just push the rundown back an hour. So immediately after this, about 10 minutes after this, we're going to do a rundown of today's news. There's a lot. Actually, there's breaking news just as this was starting. There was a congresswoman who was in a standoff of some kind with the Capitol Hill police. They were not letting her into her office because she tripped the metal detectors, and she wouldn't let them search her bag. So that got a little. But whatever else is going on, we will have it all for you shortly after this show. We do thank you for joining us. If you have not yet subscribed, please do like and subscribe. That's a great way to support the show. You can also become a patron. Come join us at our patron hangouts and get to hang out with everybody who contributes on In Time. We all show up there. Also, our Discord, which has been awfully lively recently. Come on in, join us on our Discord, see what's going on, find out. We have oftentimes, pretty much cutting edge news if it's happening, and it's national news. You will see it on our Discord almost certainly, so we've been very good about keeping up with that. So, so today is an interesting one. We're going to be discussing sort of the post-truth world, and it's going to dovetail into very nicely the last time we had on Dr. John Shook. You got a chance to chat with him just a little bit. Wasn't too long. I had to be Daddy Nick and be like, nope, show's starting. Gotta go. But he's a philosopher, teaches or a PhD in philosophy, and we were lucky enough to have him on last time. He talked about generations theory, which was controversial. A lot of people were talking about that one for a while. We have linked that episode directly below in this, so you can go check that out. But he had said a lot of controversial things, including that we were in fact already in a civil war, and he talked about what we could expect come sort of towards the beginning of the new year after the holidays, including but not limited to protests and or riots in every state in the union. And as people who have been following us or have turned on their television know, that's actually been promised starting on the 16th as pro-Trump supporters fomented into just violence and insurrection to the point of the fact that Trump will probably be impeached on incitement of insurrection tomorrow. It's crazy. And so we have on the man who talked about that and a whole bunch of other stuff, Dr. John Shook. So without any further ado, please join me in welcoming Dr. Shook. Dr. Shook, and you're perfect. So how are you?
I'm very well. How are you folks?
I'm doing well.
We're doing fantastic.
Wonderful. So, and I forgot to mention, too, we're also going to have you back a week from tomorrow to discuss. It's going to be our continuing series on philosophy, Introduction to Philosophy, and we are going to discuss what is epistemology. So, look forward to, which
sounds dreadfully dull.
Thank God. Okay. Do not listen
to the man. Can we change the title?
How do you know that, though?
Oh, dear
How
Lord.
About,
she just went there. She just went there.
How about what is truth?
What is truth? Well, we could absolutely do that.
There's no reason.
What is truth? Oh, well, no, I completely concur. It's just for us, there's been an ongoing series. So for people who are interested in philosophy, it's just a series that goes 1, 2, 3, 4 on sort of the ropes of philosophy. And those do have the terribly dull, boring titles, but then people know what it is. But yeah, then other people are looking for we can call it that. So I will change the name. Not a problem.
Well, you've already been very accommodating. When we were talking about epistemology, I said, how about a lead-in show about post-truth? To just sort of get people thinking about where did things go wrong? When did our country stop worrying about truth? So,
well, let's start talking about that. So, we all sort of know that there is this post-truth idea, this fake news idea. We've heard it. We've had a lot of people talking about it. And it sort of actually, I think, has a lot to do with what's going on today. I mean, we all see, we see people saying, well, there's no evidence, but it doesn't matter. We know that the election was stolen. We know that Trump has won. We know, and all these arguments, and without any fact whatsoever. And it's taken social media a very long time to catch up and start to even take these things seriously. So, when did this start, and where do we stand, and what do we do about it? Three big questions, I think.
Those are three big questions. Post-truth isn't really just about politics, although as we can see on a daily basis, the impact of living in a post-truth world in and on politics, and there's a reciprocal relationship. But it's not just about politics having only a casual relationship with the truth. Living in a post-truth world means the world you inhabit, the society you inhabit, is just so over truth. Like, they're just over it. Like, they have a dim recollection of living in a truth world where truth mattered, things like evidence and reasoning and rationality and objectivity did and should eventually prevail, but that they can tell that's really not the society they're living in now. Even if they personally still want to live in a truth world, society has moved on, and that's what's happened to America maybe over about the past 20 years. Politics and also much of academics was heading in that direction even in the 80s and 90s. But now it's encompassed most of society, including you and me. Make no mistake, you and I are living in a post-truth world. This isn't for the loonies. This isn't for the malcontents. This isn't for, the somebody you think is dumber than you are. You're part of the post-truth world. My hosts, you two folks, there are, I bet you inside of 2 minutes, I could find some topic where you're just very post-truth about it. You're just so over worrying about what is true. And that differs from topic to topic. It may be a political topic, could be something else. For example, it could be something like religion. Nick, I think you're probably pretty post-truth over a wide variety of topics. Let me dig a little bit. I'm interested in
having that discussion.
Tell me.
I'm in denial, so I don't need post-truth because I'm in denial. But
being in denial is a symptom of post-truth.
No, it doesn't have to be because again, I'm in denial, so I don't know what you're talking about. Okay,
let's find out.
What are you going to ask me, please?
What do you feel in denial about?
Nothing. That was a joke. Why you were going to ask a question? I think on religion, which I'm more than happy to. If that's an area where you think,
would you consider yourself a skeptic to some degree about a variety of religious matters?
Yeah, in general, I am. Am I a skeptic on the religious matters? I am an anti-theist, which is to say that I believe, in terms of classical theism, that religions that tell other people how to live should be opposed. As if the person themselves have a belief, then great, they can have those beliefs. I don't oppose beliefs. I don't sit there and say, well, if the belief is inherently in some way, quote, irrational, I have to oppose it. I only oppose imposing those beliefs in others. I don't share any of those beliefs, but I don't question the beliefs in others unless I'm.
Hey! Who's the philosopher here? That was a long-winded, roundabout, confusing philosophical answer.
My BA
yes
was in philosophy. No. I can't answer yes or no.
I'll give the windbag.
I don't think it's as easy as yes or no. I am skeptical of claims.
Let's make it real simple.
I'm skeptical of those claims.
Do you think God is real?
Do I think? I do not. I do not believe that there is a God. No.
Right. So somebody who answers like that really isn't in a post-truth world religiously, because you think that there is a truth that can be understood about the question of God's reality. And the answer for you happens to be no. For other people, the answer has to be yes. But what you, the anti-theist, and the theist share in common, by definition, is that both of you are living in a truth world on this particular question, at least, of God's reality.
Yes.
You happen to be a doubter and a skeptic, but you think there is a truth of the matter, and of course the theist does too. The fact that you give contrary answers means that you're still both on sort of the truth playing field. You can sort of see each other. You can tell whether or not you're contrary. You think, for example, that arguing over the matter should make a difference. You see what I'm saying so far?
Time scale, maybe,
so you're living in a truth world about God.
Yes.
But we know plenty of people, you know plenty of people, certainly I do, who, if you ask them whether or not God is real, they don't know how to answer. They just don't have any interest in the question.
Yes.
They don't know what it means to say yes or no, and in fact, you can never get a yes or no answer about them. They become inarticulate, or they may challenge you on the meaning of God, they become evasive, or they just lose interest and try to change the topic. That is what it's like to live in a post-truth world about this particular question of God's reality. Most people in the world who aren't theists are not non-theists like you. They're not anti-theists. They just don't care. They have no opinion whatsoever on God's reality. They're in a religious post-truth world. They could not make sense of even thinking about how it could possibly be true or false. They're just uninterested. They get how some people think there is a God and how other people think that there isn't a God, but they take the matter to be entirely one of opinion or who you hang out with or what makes you feel good, right? But you can't argue with these people one way or another. They are post-truth about, in this case, one particular question of God's existence. How am I doing so far? Trying to make a distinction between living in a truth world and a post-truth world on a particular topic.
I think that makes a lot of sense. So I would have, I think before this thought that post-truth, and I think that I could see where this would be a mistake anyway. What I was thinking was, well, post-truth is that people are lying all the time, and that's not necessarily accurate so long as people would ostensibly care that there is a truth. And so what you're saying, if I understand correctly, isn't that it's about lies, it's that nobody actually cares. The truth of a given proposition is actually irrelevant to the people who are engaged on it. Yeah.
They're just
Also,
over it.
If I could just ask you a question here real quick, though, because it seems to me that the pushback I think that I would offer to that is a response could be that in at least certain aspects of secular Western society, that secularism has won out. I don't think that not having opinion on something is evidence of being post-truth, and not wanting to bother with a particular question evidence of being post-truth. It could just be the fact that maybe, again, in certain secular societies, we could just say atheism won out, or it's that, especially for someone younger, right? Because I think that's going to be the people that have that attitude the most, the people that are younger. They don't have time to bother with certain questions, right? These really esoteric, and that's because. But it's not having it doesn't seem to me that not having an opinion on something because of the demands that we place on people, right? You gotta go to school, you gotta do all this, you gotta do all that, you gotta be responsible, you gotta live through a pandemic and work and pay taxes and take care of your dog and everything like that. I only have so much RAM, right? So there are things that I just don't have an opinion on. It's not that I couldn't have an opinion on them. It's that I've just got to throw some stuff overboard, which is why, for instance, I really don't care about Title IX.
You're not saying anything I'm trying to disagree with. You're elaborately illustrating post-truth. I think you're trying to defend people. This isn't about responsibility. I, for example, think people should stop being atheists. I happen to be an atheist because I still think that there's a truth about God, but I think secularism would be immeasurably advanced much faster if more and more people stopped even caring about being atheists. In other words, being an atheist still is giving too much power over the human mind over to religion. I'm a secularist, which I think, I hope for a future in which future generations live in a post-truth world about God. They don't have to care. They don't have to think about it. They don't have to be judged. They don't have to be argued with. They don't have to feel bad about not caring about God. They don't have to be judged. You know, there's nothing wrong with them.
I guess my question is...
I do want to hear what. So would one maybe possibly argue like post-truth about race, which maybe isn't quite, but this idea where all of a sudden race is irrelevant. Nobody cares. They're oblivious to the fact that there are differences in colors of skin, or is that like an ideal that we might shoot for? I'm just trying to. That's not going to connect.
That's not going to connect well to the post-truth world. The deal with race is that it's a social construction. It's real because we think it does. So something like race can't just be wished away by hoping we go into a post-truth world, because there was never any truth about race or racism in the first place. There's certainly no biological basis for it. So that doesn't intersect with what I'm talking about. There never was a truth world about race. Race and racism live purely in the realm of social invention and convention. Now, racism and prejudice can ally and join forces in a post-truth world, but one is not the manifestation of another. It's a purely social phenomenon. Living in a truth world means that there's something objectively true that can be discovered about, and then fill in the blank, something real, something in reality. God might be a candidate, or whether or not a vaccine authentically works, or who won the election. These are at least candidates for objective matters. There was never any objectivity to the category of race, and hence racism is idolizing something of our own imagination entirely. So I'm going to sidestep prejudice. Right. We can bring it back later in, because part of living in a post-truth world makes us very susceptible to ideology. And that's where terrible prejudices can take advantage of living in a post-truth world. Let's use another illustration.
I think Vox had a question, and I had tried to elucidate. And I think I failed to do that, but I interrupted to try to elucidate. I failed. I do want Vox to finish her point, because she was in the middle of something when I.
All right, so we've got a little bit of a latency issue, so I'm being very careful not to try to overtalk anybody here. I think I'm going to step back for a minute and just continue and continue to let Dr. Schick go here. I just kind of want to differentiate here, put a little flag in the sand that I think I would differentiate between calling something post-truth and saying this person doesn't have time to look into whether or not there is something objective.
Oh, I see what you're saying. That's a person who lives in a pre-truth world. There's sort of pre-truth, truth world, and post-truth.
Yeah.
What you're talking about is just somebody being ignorant. They're uninformed, and that's why they have.
So I can think
pre-truth. That's a kind of innocence that it's there, but it's not part of the story.
I can think of, there's several topics that have been plopped into my lap recently that I am ignorant on, right? That I just don't have time currently to look into whether
you and I would share this. For example, neither you or I, I'm just guessing, would have an opinion about whether a 53 Chateau Lafite is a better quality wine than a 67 Chardonnay from Nice. I mean, I don't know what you're talking about. I live in a pre-truth world. I have no opinion. It's not that I live in a post-truth world.
You stepped on a minefield there. Well done. Well done. Good choice. Kudos. All All right, so to
Let me give you
clarify, oh, please, yes, please.
Well, you mentioned lying earlier. So lying is not part of a post-truth world. It's sort of the doorway. You're creeping right up to it. But actually lying presupposes and assumes the truth world. Because in order to lie about something, you have to, one, think that there is a truth about it and have a guess as to what that is. You don't have to know for certain, but, right, I can't lie about whether or not I'm a millionaire unless I already know what a millionaire is, how it would be verifiable, and that I'm not a millionaire. You see what I'm saying? So I live in a truth world about my bank account. That's why I can lie about it. But lying is the gateway drug, because lying is a kind of deception. But going beyond lying is indeed 100% into a post-truth world. The next step would be beyond lying would be what we call misrepresenting matters. You misrepresent something when you just state something, you say this is true, and you don't really have any idea whatsoever whether or not it's true. You're just misrepresenting things. Or you're trying to sort of lie by omission. Have you ever heard that phrase?
Yes.
You're sort of selectively stating things, and that's enough to deceive people. You're not lying. Nothing you say is false, but you selectively misrepresent just enough so that you've thrown people off the track, and now you're fully in the realm of misinformation. The third category that really lets you know you're in a post-truth world is, and I'm here going to use the technical, logical term, bullshitting. But bullshitting is different from lying or misrepresenting. Bullshitting is when you just literally imaginatively manufacture a story to try to get people to believe it, but you have no idea what is the truth, and you have no interest in anybody ever finding out the truth or whether there's a truth to be found. You just bullshit. So lying, misrepresenting, and bullshitting are the three first stages in the initial steps of heading into the post-truth world, both for yourself and for your audience that could be willingly taken in by it. I'll pause there if there's any questions about those three distinctions. And then I'll give you an illustration from something I heard today on C-SPAN from Congress. Were you listening in to the congressional hearings?
I was not. I wanted to, but I was not. So we have lost Vox, and she's trying to get back in. If she can't get back in, we may try another connection method. But she's having some issues. So no. Well, I think it's interesting. I like what you said too. Is in order to deny what the truth is, which is a lie in one way or another, you have to assume that there is a truth to deny. Therefore, lying is not not post-truth, because it still presupposes the existence of truth. So I think that's interesting. I am planning a show on lying. It's probably going to be a small show. I was thinking of doing, we have a nick in time where I just opine for 5 minutes on something. But I think it's interesting. People always accuse somebody else of lying when either they're mistaken or, is a misrepresentation a kind of lie, or is it? So I actually just find that interesting because I have a fascination with language. But so moving on, though, so we've started into this post-truth world. If there was something that in your mind sort of was a good benchmark for us, saying, okay, now we're starting to, if there was an inciting incident where you could look at it and say, yeah, here I see it, that would be great. If not, I certainly do want to hear, either way, I don't want to forget getting to your example of if today from the hearings. Now, is this the hearings on I know there was a resolution on the 25th, and then there was also, I don't know if they're debating, were they debating impeachment, or was it just the... They're
in committee today.
Okay.
The House Rules Committee, they're going to vote out the article of impeachment. And certain Republican pro-Trump congressman defended Trump. And it was fascinating theater because the Democrats were trying to get certain Republicans, notably Jim Jordan. Have you heard of him?
Yes.
Boy, he's going to go down with the ship. He's a pro-Trumper.
I am surprised how many are willing to go down with the ship, but yeah, there's a number. There's a number willing to do that. It's a little shocking.
Well, some of the rats are jumping ship, but not him, not yet. But the Democrats were hounding him, trying to get him to answer a simple yes or no question. Do you think the election was stolen from Trump? And Jordan would not give a straight answer to the question. He just would. He squirmed. And he said a lot of other things that indicated that he wants to stay in a post-truth world about the election. For example, he was unwilling to state yes or no to a easily answerable question. Do you think the election was stolen from Trump? Because if he had given a yes or no answer to that question, he would have at least had one foot still in the truth world. He doesn't want to be there. You can tell. He doesn't want to be there. What he argued was basically with a lot of misrepresentations and bullshit. One misrepresentation was he said, well, the American people still have a lot of unanswered questions about the legitimacy of this or that vote counting in this or that state, which is, of course, a complete misrepresentation. It goes beyond lying. He's misrepresenting it by saying, of course, that that there are still legitimate legal questions about which votes should count and which are not. That's not true. I mean, because it's been adjudicated in 60 times in a variety of states and courts. They've all been thrown out for lack of evidence. So this is a clear misrepresentation. And then he veered off into complete bullshit, where he started talking about things in utter reckless disregard for whether or not there could be any evidence.
Which is, I mean, Trump is, I think, our first full-blown post-truth president. I mean, even if we had been in a post-truth era, Obama was not post-truth. Trump irrefutably is, and it's amazing to me to speak to people who support him and realize, I sometimes, and this is why I get a little iffy when people say they're idiots, they're stupid. Some are. I'm not going to sit there and say that, but even a number of the ones who, but for somehow there's a switch that's flipped, and they don't care about the reality. What I've been saying is the reality of the situation. They don't care whether or not he is the greatest president ever. He just is the greatest president ever, and you can't actually even apply that to a truth claim. That's not a truth value statement of any kind. That America is the greatest country in the world is one that's been around for a while. And at first you could sit there and say, well, listen, I'm a patriot, but we've got our issues. And that's a non-starter because there's no way to even approach that. Why would one approach that? And it seems to me to be what people say about feels before reals. I feel it's true. So it doesn't really nothing else matters. If it feels it to me, that's it.
And politicians have always noticed that. Politics always has one foot in the post-truth world. A classic example, off-cited, is going way back to Newt Gingrich. You remember the Newt Gingrich and that crowd in the 90s. So Newt Gingrich is being interviewed, and I'm going to give you the quick and dirty. Don't quote me on this or fact check me. But he's being grilled about whether or not crime is up in the cities. And Gingrich kept telling the anchor person interviewing him that crime is going up and up and up in most of American cities. And the reporter, having done the homework, is saying to Gingrich, no, actually, in almost all cities during the 90s, crime has been going down a little bit in some, a lot in others, which is in fact the truth as reported by the federal government statistics, right? It's not reporters claiming it. It's the U.S. government is publishing these statistics. Well, Gingrich wasn't having any of it.
Yep.
Gingrich started talking about how, well, the American people know that crime is going up in their cities. And the reporter's like, how would the people know that? And Gingrich is like, well, they just feel that crime is going up in American cities. And the anchor person says, but that isn't true. And Gingrich says, I'll go with what the people know is true, what they feel is true. And the reason why Gingrich is saying that is because he's a politician. And politicians get elected based on what their constituents feel is true. And a politician will never go wrong going that route, Republican or Democrat. So the real problem came when the politics and the media crossed wires and created the Frankenstein monster that we know as Fox News. In other words, the point and purpose of Fox News was to generate precisely the sort of public propaganda that then Republicans could say, the people already believe it. And now you've got the circuit closed and the electricity runs, the circuit is complete, so that whatever the Republicans can say on Fox News, the people will believe, and then the polls go ask the people and find out that most Republicans believe it, so then the Republican politicians repeat it, and obviously things got out of control over the past 15 years. So this goes into now the realm of propaganda. Propaganda is the next layer on the cake. So far I've given you the 3 layers of the first stage. Misinformation, remember that was lying, misrepresentation, and bullshit. But propaganda takes it to a whole nother level. Propaganda is when messaging to the public succeeds for a lot of the public, and they start making value judgments about who is good, who's on the right side, who's bad, who's on the wrong side, and most importantly of all, who's guilty. Who's guilty, right?
Yeah.
Mere misinformation isn't about value judgments. It's about creating ignorance and confusion. But then propaganda takes that to the next stage by taking advantage of it and trying to manipulate the people in order to control how they view everything going on in society around them. That's what we call propaganda. You're not just misinforming the public, you're misinforming them in such a way as to make our side good and innocent and the opposed side guilty and the enemy. And this is where politics truly got completely polarized by the early teens, probably around 2010, you could see this perfect storm brewing. So the Republican Party shifted further right based upon all of this propaganda that they were being fed about how they were the real Americans, about how they had to keep voting for Republicans. And then all Trump had to do was, walk up, grab the keys, start the motor purring, and drive a car he didn't build.
I don't know if I have returned. Can I be heard?
Yeah, I can hear you.
I just cannot no longer see myself in the camera for some reason, even though my feed's on. So, okay, I'm back. I had a question for you. So how is, I know Donald Trump and some of these Republicans, I know that with the speed that was with which misinformation travels now, it's obviously more than it's ever been due to technology that we have that we did not have in the past. But is this really any different than McCarthyism? Is this really any different than the myth of the American Revolution, or the Roman? The Roman Caesars. Is it? is it really, is the climate that we find ourselves in so much different other than the fact that we have the ability to transmit misinformation at such a rapid pace?
We are truly in a qualitatively new civilization where post-truth is going to be harder to stamp out than ever. Let me explain why. If you think misrepresentation is as old as language, you'd be right. There's been lying amongst cave people, right? Propaganda, that's been around as long as there's been governments. Politicians building themselves up into legends. Yeah, the first kings figured out how to do this. But a post-truth world is something truly new, and the internet is responsible. Television couldn't have done it, although television did help make propaganda worse. But the key thing isn't the media, it's the speed at which the public can generate and propagate its own misinformation and propaganda. That's new. Television, that wasn't happening. Why not? Because the millions at home watching CBS, NBC, or ABC weren't talking back to each other through their television screens.
Sure, yeah.
This is an old argument. For example, it's entangled with free speech. John Stuart Mill gave the classic defense of free speech back in the 19th century, and he was dealing with things like newspapers, there was government propaganda everywhere. It was a mess, and there was plenty of opportunities for post-truth. But John Stuart Mill said, in the long run, truth will win. That was his defense, essentially, of free speech. Let everybody speak whatever they want. The better argument will eventually win, and society will sort of converge on at least something sort of like objectivity. That was fine in the age of newspapers. That was even almost possible in the age of television with Dan Rather telling you like it was on the evening news. Those days are gone. When you have misinformation and propaganda, not just top down, not just one way, but an eager, large portion of society having Facebook, having Twitter, Instagram, and so on, able to repeat it, like with repeater antennas, and create their own content. Hello, YouTube. Now we have a sizable percentage of society, literally within the matter of hours, regenerating their own echo chamber. This is new. The Romans didn't have it. The British didn't have it.
Sure,
TV in the golden age didn't have it. We are now the propaganda and misinformation and ideology content spreaders and content creators. What does this mean? It's too fast. Truth does not have the advantage of the long run anymore. John Stuart Mill's argument in favor of free speech does not work anymore, and that's why I'm now in favor of censorship. Heavy, pervasive government and corporate censorship, which maybe, by the way, could be a topic for another show, Nick, if you want to have me back after we get through all of this truth. Truth doesn't have a chance anymore in this post-truth world. A portion of society has just sailed off into their own post-truth world. We're not getting them back.
It's the first time I've ever heard of improving truth through censorship. I think that's an interesting topic. I think we should. Yes, Fox, I'm sorry.
So it seems so then that you would agree then that the thing that like the it may be that there are a lot of necessary components to this, but the sufficient component to this is that is technology, right? That's the thing that's really propelling this forward.
Well, technology was always going to be the thing. That's communications. So, if there is going to be something like knowledge and truth that matters in a society, it's ultimately going to be a matter about how well and how accurately society is going to be able to, figure out what the truth is, propagate it, and educate the masses. Education has always been essential, especially to what we like to call free societies and democracies. We're in a post-truth world now.
Well, so it's interesting that you bring that up, because this is, something that I have discussed before, is that it almost seems as if we have done this to ourselves, right? Because I think that the reason that if you have people that are provided for, taken care of, not stressed, given purpose, these things, I think, tend to not occur. We live in a society where we have put the almighty dollar ahead of everything else. I mean, life itself, we have put the almighty dollar in front of, to the point where the vast majority of people have little to no direction, little to no purpose, little to no meaning, little to no hope. And when you have the largest portions of society, the largest numbers of people that are living like that, you are just asking for something like Trump to come along, sweep them up, right? Oh, we had a movie about this. It was The American President, right? The American President predicted this with Michael Douglas. He said, how do you win elections? You get a bunch of middle-aged, middle-class white people together and you tell them about easier times and you point your finger and you tell them they're people to blame and we're going to beat them, right? None of it's fucking true. None of those people are to blame, but they believe it because they have what? No hope, no purpose, no recognition, nothing. They have nothing. So we did it to ourselves, this, right? If we had a society, if we lived in a society where we actually cared about the bottom of our society as opposed to the top of our society, we would not be living in the post-truth society in any near quality as what you are talking about and what I agree we are currently living in.
Oh, a fascinating question, probably beyond the purview of this single show. What are the sufficient social and economic conditions? Communist China went into a post-truth world about 60-odd years ago under Mao. China 60 years ago, very different from the United States 60 years ago, and certainly from the United States now. And China went into a post-truth world. But for somewhat different socioeconomic reasons, of course, they went with the communist totalitarian state and ended up in a post-truth world. We started off with a relatively prosperous first world industrialized nation and ended up in a post-truth world. If there's a moral there, no one is necessarily immune. Not even Weimar Germany of the early 1930s. Oh, that was Hitler. So I think there are many socioeconomic routes to a post-truth world. We in America should certainly no longer think that we're immune from such a thing, even though we got there by our own path.
There's really not a lot of difference right now between the South Africa that I grew up with in the 80s and 90s and America today, as far as inequality, lack of truth, lack of objectivity, lack of leadership, systemic racism, crumbling institutions. There's a whole nine yards. There's really not much different. We are not a first world country. We're not. We're not a third world country. And I say we, my parents are both American, so I feel that I can call myself American, even though I was born in Cape Town. We are not a first world country. Europe has first world countries. We are not. We don't, just simply because we have big, shiny cities. So does Somalia. Somalia has big, shiny cities, right? Ethiopia, Botswana has big, shiny cities. We wouldn't consider those first world countries. So we did this to ourselves. We really did, because we're expecting the guy on the factory floor that's putting the rubber around the tire well to be able to differentiate between whether or not a nuclear arms treaty is beneficial to the United States of America and globalization as a whole. He doesn't have the capacity. Right? And so then we introduced the lobbyists who found wedge issues to divide Americans over abortion and religion and various other things, because most Americans agree about most things most of the time. So you got to find ways to divide them so you can have Democrats and Republicans and everything else that's in between. And so it was our leadership that took a very bunch of susceptible people, and we did this to ourselves. So when I see Donald Trump rise, when I see what happened on the 6th, when I see the attempted coup and the insurrection in this president, I think to myself, yeah, I saw that one coming. I saw that one coming a mile away, right? It started with Goldwater and McCarthy. And this is just the natural progression of it. It really is.
You just enunciated a skepticism about democracy, which indicates you're in a post-truth world about democracy. The great hope for democracy lay in, of course, education of the masses and certain pillars, social institutions, for example, educational, right? Particularly higher education, colleges and universities. And then, of course, our professions. They were supposed to be the safeguards of democracy. And one of the symptoms that this post-truth world is not only gained dominance, but may have it permanently, is because the post-truth world has now gone into stage 3. Yes, my viewers were waiting for it. I'm building it like a wedding cake, right? Now we're at stage 3, where the propaganda has gotten so out of control that now we're in an ideological phase, trying to convince the public that they can no longer respect and trust these long-time pillars of democracy, namely education and especially higher education, professions like the legal profession, or bureaucrats that work at professional agencies of the U.S. government, people who really understand public policy, social reform, anything having to do with science, for example. So now we are in a full-blown post-truth world because the propaganda is not just directed at confusing and orienting and controlling the people's values and how they're going to vote, but that propaganda is now running through the public, and the public is now skeptical and cynical towards the very institutions that truly make democracy viable. The right wing of the Republican Party, which now I guess is the entire Republican Party, didn't used to be under, you mentioned McGovern and so on. Now they're very anti higher education, because this is supposedly, right, the bastion of liberalism. They're not wrong for that. That wasn't the propaganda part. America's colleges and universities are a bastion of liberalism in the classic Enlightenment small L liberalism sense. The liberal arts and sciences are liberal because they liberate the human mind to be able to think for itself. But that's not the agenda of the post-truth world. The post-truth world is designed to cocoon the individual voter in the self-satisfaction, that certainty of knowing that they'll never have to be proven wrong. Why? Because everything they listen to in the media or from their fellow Americans always says the same things that already agree what they believe. So you get a giant mass effect, what might be called a confirmation bias. The public now, the vast majority of the American public, has slipped into this post-truth world, right and left. The left is not exempted, where they only accept and listen to what already is in fundamental agreement with their political and ideological orientation. Each side now feeling that they're somehow superior in knowledge to the other side, but both sides having lost interest, lost sight of any way of figuring out what is actually true. Now, the third layer is that ideology, where you're only now going to listen to things that already agree with your position. This is what's called tribalistic thinking for sociology or anthropology. And America is looking like it's broken up into multiple tribes. There's also a lot of mythic thinking and conspiracy thinking. The human brain is prone to these. This isn't a right or left. You're not immune to it. We all are quite susceptible to it. Mythic thinking comes in when we see the patterns and we already know the explanation. Anything that happens in the headlines, anything we read on Facebook, anything our political leaders say, oh, that fits the pattern. Why? Because you already know the pattern. You already know the explanation for why things are going on in the world, and that's what you're comfortable with. One manifestation of this specifically is what's called conspiracy thinking. The other side, opposed to you, because you've already bought the propaganda and the ideology, they're the ones who are up to no good. So a lot of what is happening in the headlines is easily explained because there's a conspiracy. Well, conspiracies have to be for somebody and against somebody else, but that's already been answered by this kind of black and white thinking. The conspiracy is trying to help the evil people who hate our country, and it's trying to hurt the real Americans who love our country. And at that stage, the ideology has really set in, and a post-truth world is now completely surrendered to this ideology. And that is now what is going to control the masses. And democracy no longer stands a chance at that point. Democracy for the classical thinkers from Plato, Machiavelli, Hobbes, on down to the 20th century who are skeptical about democracy, they've all pointed to this same thing. It's just happening so fast right now, where societies are just going to get polarized, and in the end, democracy is going to get tossed aside, and somebody is going to take power.
All right. What I'd like to do is I'd like to give Vox a chance to go, and then I'd like to, so Vox can I have some comments, and then maybe try to wrap up in about 15 minutes, if that works for both of you guys. And I just want to make sure we have time to talk about what are solutions. But please, Vox, why don't you finish?
That's basically where I was going to go. My question
it's just we're there. We've been doing this long enough. It's just like she's like no, Nick, we're not. Okay, sorry.
So where do we? Where would you say? Where do we go for? Because I believe that there are solutions to these problems. I believe that they're very difficult solutions. I believe that they require bold action, bold thinking, so to speak. But I believe that they're possible, and I still have, it's beaten up, but I still have a bit of enduring optimism for humanity. I do not think that the answer to these things is necessarily more education currently, although I think education is necessary. I think the answer to these things is a resurgence of labor. I think the answer to these things are economic, not academic. I think it just comes down to money. I think it comes down to universal health care, a true solving of institutional racism, true equal opportunity, and the stamping out via laws of racism, and a forcing of togetherness via eradication of gentrification, institutions of universal basic income and federal job guarantees and things like that, and of course instituting Bill Mitchell's and Stephanie Kelton's baby child of the modern monetary theory economic systems. And I think that once we provide for people, right, you are provided for, you will want for nothing. I am provided for, Nick is provided for. We will never know a day when we are not provided for, short of like somebody dropping a nuclear bomb on us. So we're not going to go hungry, but people in the United States, 1 in 4 children right now is wondering where their next meal is coming from right now in the United States. We can't fix anything until we fix that. And so I think the solution to these things is an economic. Do you have something different? Would you say that there's a different approach, a better approach?
There'd better be one, because yours won't work. Here's why. Yours is the classic pro-democratic solution to this perennial problem. Again, the Greeks debated this. Yours is the social justice and socialism remedy. Mm-hmm. There's 2 problems, one empirical and one logical. One is empirical. If you actually look at the histories of countries that have tried to advocate for social justice through very expensive social welfare and nanny state solutions, in other words, Europe, much of Europe, you would think, well, that immunizes them against right-wing hate and ideology. Except it doesn't. What have we been watching going on in Europe for the last 10 years? Some of the most heavily social justice oriented and socialist countries have fallen into even worse post-truth, fascist and right-wing ideologies that have overtaken governments. Not even Germany was exempt. Not even France was exempt. So the social justice and socialist solution, however much it might look good in the abstract, empirically has a mixed record. Mixed record. There are obviously other problematic causes that would also have to be remedied. So that's the empirical problem. If you actually look at countries trying to keep democracies going with socialist welfare states, some succeed and some don't. Some their democracies collapse. So we have to keep an eye on that. It's not a surefire remedy at any rate. However much we want social justice for its own sake, and we should want social justice for its own sake. I'm not saying anything. I want more social justice. I'm just saying it's not the solution, surefire guarantee for the post-truth world. The logical objection goes like this. Let's suppose we agree that there should be a mass redistribution of income and property along the social justice and socialist lines. How are you going to do that in America?
Tax policy.
You're not, yeah, but you're not going to do it. The reason why you're not going to do it is because it's too late. In other words, we're already entrenched in such a post-truth world that there will always be a permanent base of Americans, roughly between 40 and 45%, who will never vote for that. They just won't. Right now, we call them Trump's base, but Trump will come and Trump will go. The base isn't going anywhere, not at least in America. And I know you agree with me because you were drawing very sincere and accurate parallels between the United States and South Africa.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. I absolutely agree. So one of the things
you could put in power a Democratic House of Representatives, a Democratic Senate, and Democratic President. Wait 8 years, and you're not going to get much advance on economic disparity or much advance on social justice because there are just too many powerful retarding forces on American democracy right now to go along with it. And if you want 8 years example, I'll give you the Obama presidency.
Sure, yeah, I agree.
We had 8 years, much of it Democratic controlled, and you can't tell me America got better on the metrics you're asking for. So again, I think your original skepticism towards democracy was accurate. If we're going to move in the direction of social justice and at least socialist redistribution, reining in the economic disparities, it won't be accomplished by democratic means. I just proved it to you both empirically and logically. Now, that doesn't mean there aren't any other means of accomplishing social justice and socialism. I'm just claiming that they would not be democratic. That is to say, they would be accomplished without voluntary participation by a majority of Americans. The alternative, classically, to democracy is aristocracy. That is ruled by those who are true experts. And I detected a sort of wistful longing for genuine experts of statescraft in what you were saying earlier.
So I like this guy. I like this guy.
I'm glad you like this guy. Well, he's controversial. We've had a couple people on there going like, "What he's saying is controversial."
What? So, I know that you're trying to get in here because we do need to wind down, right? But I am not. Democracy is okay, but I'm not a Democrat. I am what would you call? I don't know if you'd call it an elitist, an academic elitist, a snob. I think I believe in a ruling class, to an extent, to a small extent. But
yeah.
I do think we're going to have to move towards winding this up. But I could talk with you for hours about this. It's fantastic.
Well, we need to try to get him on the Discord. I also wanted to do two quick things, which is one, just sort of, as if I understand it, just to try to put it in the simplest. So essentially what you're saying is the reason we can't fix it with democracy is because the well's been too badly poisoned and we'll never unpoison. You're always going to have that 40%. That 40% you're going to see sort of also across countries.
Especially after the internet. Yeah.
All right. So I just wanted to make sure, I just wanted to try to put a pin on that. We also have a super chat that I do want to get to, but I want to just make sure that we've sort of rounded off the end of that topic, hit the super chat, and see if we can close it up. But was there?
I think we've gotten, we got. If we go any further, we're going to have to go for another hour.
It'll be another hour. Look, we will have him back, and we will allocate extra time next time, and hopefully the government won't be on fire with everybody waiting for the for our news show afterwards, which will be probably in about 10 minutes after this closes down, regardless of when the clock is on it. But we have a $5 super chat from the Sinister Porpoise. Sinister Porpoise, thank you so much for your contribution. I think that's the first time she's given us the super chat, so thank you. We really appreciate it. Her question is, do you think that, and this is going to be a little beyond me, I think, do you think that weak AI selection algorithms? Oh no, I know what she's saying. Oh, this is a good question. Do you think we also talked to her about doing a show on this one? Do you think the weak AI selection algorithms used by Google, Facebook, and Twitter that confirms our biases are contributing to the information bubble problem?
Of course.
So that was a very good. Porpoise, we have to do a show on that. Yeah, we have to do a show on that, and
that's what I call in my professional philosophical jargon. A no-duh truth.
No duh truth. I think we're gonna have to do a show. I think she wanted. Can you give us like a 5-minute on how and why that is, or is? I mean, I completely concur with you. I'm not disagreeing, but it to just. So what is it? So
creatures like Facebook, and to a greater or lesser extent the rest of them. Well, of course, they rely on algorithms in order to try to control what we see. Essentially, these media companies treat us as users. And to steal a quote from a recent documentary on how social media controls the mind, they're named the only two industries that call their clients users. The drug industry and social media.
Ooh,
that's not mine. They're documentaries that you should check out about social media that got that going. It's a great meme.
Well, they also use the term product.
What is happening here is there's a dramatic competition for our attention, of course, for the purposes of advertising. So Facebook recently admitted, although everybody who was paying attention knew it, that of course the number one way that a person found themselves joining up with something like QAnon or some of these other dangerous far-right conspiracy groups was because Facebook told them about it.
Oh, dear Lord.
Facebook controlled the feed because this person had already shown an interest in purchasing rifles or, something other, something, maybe they were, a Tea Party or something years back, but they just make correlations. So this, what was called weak AI, is good really at only one thing. It's not that complicated. It's very good at finding correlations. In other words, it knows your user behavior, what you're interested in, and it will throw more of the same in your direction in order to control your attention. The algorithm doesn't care about content. All it cares about is the number of seconds that you are paying attention to that content, because that's what advertisers pay for. So now it may be that one of the biggest media inflations of the post-truth world may in fact now be the only way to try to get it under control. I've got an unscientific poll of two human beings right here, face to face. Do either of you have a big problem with Facebook shutting down all groups that have anything to do with QAnon conspiracies.
Not a bit.
Do you have a big problem with that?
Oh,
Does that
I might
offend
take
your
exception
free
to, but
speech
most certainly no.
intuitions?
No,
because
I
it's
think there has
not
to be
freedom
some
of
censorship.
speech.
Yes.
No, because it's not freedom of speech, right? This is. It's a fundamental misunderstanding of what freedom of speech is. Freedom of speech has absolutely nothing to do with what a private establishment does or does not. Right?
Well,
It's got to do with whether or not the government prevents you from doing something in a public setting. So you're free to go to the public square, to the town crier, and scream at the top of your lungs, so long as you're not directly inciting violence. But you are not. But you come into my business. I'm like, no, that's not freedom of speech. That's regulated speech necessarily through contracted terms of service.
Well, he
So
says free
when
speech
people
intuitions.
when people cry out, this is a violation of my freedom of speech, they're just full of shit.
Well, I completely agree with you, but he had said free speech intuitions, and for me, I do think there's a number of people who colloquially, especially on the left, actually, more than on the right, talk about free speech as a concept as opposed to just the, and this concept is that we all purportedly would like in order for the marketplace of free ideas to win out, you have to have a free marketplace, and all ideas have to have at least some credibility. So most people who believe in that have this intuition of free speech aside from the actual what's in the Constitution. I completely agree with you about the Constitution. I do have a tendency to think that, look, I am on a platform here, and we've talked about who we will and will not platform, and that's something we have to think about quite regularly. It wasn't that long ago I was involved in a very serious discussion about the Non Sequitur show that had platformed a Nazi, which, to tell you the truth, I wasn't against so long as one condition was met, which was that he was appropriately opposed by somebody qualified to do it. Now, that's not necessarily free speech either, because you're stacking the deck. You know, you have him come on to tell his ideas, but only so long as there's somebody who has debated Nazis, knows how to do it without making them look sympathetic, and can do it right then and there. Because, yes, I believe he should be able to talk for any number of reasons, but not unopposed. And I think where they're unopposed, especially on Facebook and so on and so forth, which they have to be because of how the algorithm works, yes, I'm much more for just shutting those things down, absolutely. But I have
Do I have one more minute to
please,
give a segue to my next show?
Please.
So earlier I brought up John Stuart Mill. Read his short book on liberty. Should be a required reading for a civilized human. Now, I told you earlier, Mill's key argument for free speech doesn't work anymore. That was his epistemic argument, namely, truth will win out in the long run. Newsflash, we're in a post-truth world. There ain't no long run anymore. The truth doesn't stand a chance, especially in the short run. And in the long run, what is truth is only becoming more divided. But Mill gave a second separate utilitarian argument for free speech, namely the civic argument, and it goes like this. We should try to have as much free speech as possible for the point of advancing public education and democracy, which means you can carve out an exception where there shouldn't be a right to free speech when it is not conducive to greater public education and sort of the civil order that you need for democracy. Something like dangerous right-wing violent conspiracy theories. In other words, the epistemic argument doesn't work anymore. And, I'll teach you about epistemology if y'all want to come back. But think about the civic argument. This gives license to Facebook and Twitter to serve the public good and the civil order and be on the side of democracy again by acting as elitist censorship directors, deciding what is at least respectful of the idea that there is a truth and trying to argue about it using evidence and reasoning, and what is beyond, what is permanently in the post-truth world, which cannot be for educating people or lessening people's ignorance or for the future of civil democracy. So that's a way where you could have both your aristocratic elitism and your democracy too, but the two have to work together. They're not the same, but the elites can use censorship for the greater purpose of protecting free speech, and that's not a paradox if you followed what I just offered, but I can expand on that on some future show about censorship. Maybe we could have a debate.
I think the censorship, actually, well, we've been meaning to have a debate too on this show. We have a debate format explicitly that we use here, but let's catch up again real soon. It's been a blast, and I think if I had realized that you and Vox would be so engaging, we would have put in another hour into the schedule, and we can certainly do that next time. We'll do that next time. So we'll have you back, and I think we had some questions about the censorship question, so I know that's going to be a biggie. And if we can find someone for you to debate on a topic, heck, it could just be Vox. I will sit back. I will have a timer. I will have popcorn. It's going to be a blast. So, Vox, was there anything else you wanted to hit on before we close it out, prep for the next show, which will be in about 10 minutes after this one?
I'm really looking forward to having all my epistemic foundations and my my views on truth examined and destroyed by Mr. Schick here. That's it's funny to me, right? There's something that you had said very early on, right? So we have a community here on Discord, and I don't know how much you get into using platforms like Discord, but I've been involved in Discord for a while, and one of the things that I've noticed in and out of communities is that there are a lot of very smart people, and there are a lot of very dumb people who think they're very smart. And there's a lot of showmanship that goes on, and it's not about for most people, it's not about learning, it's not about understanding, it's about winning. It's about wrecking, it's about owning, it's about I look smarter than you, I know a word you don't know, or to coin something that you were talking about earlier, my bullshit stick is stronger than your bullshit stick. So there will people that will come in and they've learned a few words, right? They know what a couple things mean on the surface level, which means that they, saw 30 seconds of a YouTube, clip and think that they know everything about, axiology or something like that. They come in and say, well, let me tell you what, Jordan Peterson, Sam Harris met at a bar, and I know this, right? And then of course it just boils down into the, well, no, you're stupid. No, you're stupid. No, you're stupid. No, and it has zapped almost all of my intellectual strength. I've spent vast periods of time where I no longer come on any kind of platform because I just don't have the energy. Prior to the pandemic, right? I had a social life. I had the opportunity to regularly go down and sit in lectures given by Bart Ehrman. I love listening to him. He's fantastic, and just being involved in the communities that I'm in. It's all gone now. The pandemic has shut all that down. It's a year now, and so the toll that this year has taken, and I'm sure it's taken a toll on you, and it's taken a toll and everything. And I think it's led a lot of people to be cynical. But I tell you what, we can't give up. We cannot, even if we lose, we can't give up. And I know that to be a fact. So it was absolute pleasure to talk to you, Dr. Schick.
Oh, you're very kind. It was a pleasure to talk to you and get to know you too.
All right, and so with that, we will have him back a week from tomorrow to discuss. Well, if you're the boring person, it's going to be, I guess, something along the lines of Epistemology 101. If you're someone a little more media savvy, it's going to be something along the lines of what is truth. So we'll see how that plays out. We'll
figure it out.
Yep. We're also going to have on, actually, Mowdy is going to be on as a guest. So he's one of the few people that seems to oscillate between this guest and hosting role. But we're going to have him on as a guest. He is going to be covering memory, how memory works, how we are tricked and fooled by our own memories, what do we see as memory actually the purpose serving, and also we're going to cover, I think, we were going to do hindsight bias as a separate show, but now they're one, so we're going to do that. And we got a couple of other really great shows planned. We've got the Bayesian method. We're going to be covering the Bayesian method with Dr. Richard Carrier. He will be back next month, early. I think it's the first. I'll get the calendar. It should be up there. Yeah, but there's the calendar. There's a reason we put the calendar right there. It's so that I can just sort of look into the. At any rate, we will also have a overtime rundown of today's news in about 10 minutes. So please stick around for that. I don't think I'm going to have a chance to hop into the Discord after this show. We usually hop into the Discord and try to chat, but hopefully I will have time after the rundown. So Vox, I think you're going to be joining me for that, for overtime.
Yeah, I hope I'm going to try to hopefully get my computer back up and running so we don't have the same technical difficulties that I've been experiencing. My son has been, another symptom of the pandemic. My son has had to use my work computer for various things. And of course, that includes downloading programs while I'm not away, such that, I have little artificial worms crawling all throughout my computer saying, oh, we're going to stop this, we're going to stop that. And of course, that requires bringing the computer into the office and giving it to the IT guy and saying, here, deworm this thing. But, such as it is, I haven't had the time to give it the erythromycin it needs.
So you've heard it here first. If we're late, it's Vox's fault. It's
that is correct.
fault. I love it when I get to say that instead of it's mine. All right, thank you again, Dr. John Shook. We look forward to seeing you again. Thank you all for joining us, and we will see you again in about 10 minutes for overtime. So have yourselves a wonderful evening. We'll see you in a bit.